Anshuman did his bachelor's in technology in chemical engineering before pursuing his master's in human-computer interaction and design at University of Washington. And Mahit did his bachelor's from the Department of Design, IIT Guwahati, before pursuing his master's in human-computer interaction at Carnegie Mellon University. So they will be giving a joint lecture today on pursuing masters in design, what no one talks about. So over to you, Anshuman and Mahit.
Awesome. So let's get started. Thanks for tuning in. This is going to be about, I'd say, a 30-minute talk at this point. So we have lots of types of question at the end. So that being said, let's get started. First things first, who are we and are we really qualified to give this talk? Let's see.
So, like Digisha just mentioned, I'm Anshuman and I'm currently at UW. Before this, I worked at Samsung briefly, and but I've really been designing things since like 2018, 2019-ish. And yeah, I'm gonna keep this short because I'm pretty sure a lot of y'all will end up looking us up on LinkedIn anyway. So I'm just gonna end it with the fact that I like to dance as well.
Cool. So, like you just said, I'm currently completing the MHCI program at Carnegie Mellon. Worked at Nutanix for a year prior to this, and really got into F1 over the last couple of years, thanks to Drive to Survive. I don't know if any F1 fans are in the crowd, but I can safely say Lewis Hamilton was robbed of the World Championship title last year. I would fight anyone over this, but this really isn't a time for that, so moving on. So, you're thinking of pursuing a master's. That's great. It's a good first step, and definitely the right time to think about it. As you would imagine, there are a lot of things to consider, like a lot. You begin with which program to apply to, you then start preparing for the applications, and that's a long process in itself. Once you get admitted, you begin worrying about the logistics of how to go, how to get your visas. And once you get there, once you start doing your master's, you're already start thinking about what's next. Should you do a PhD? Should you get a job? And there's just so many questions floating around. But this talk isn't going to be about all of that. Well, why not? Well, to be honest with you, there's nothing new to add in this space. A lot of people consider pursuing a master's, and there's so many kind folks who've compiled amazing resources for people just like you, especially in that space. You'll find blogs, videos, answers on Quora, Twitter threads, LinkedIn posts, all of them on the internet. So to help things get started with that, what we've done is we've compiled a list of resources we think are super helpful to help with that entire process, and you'll find them in the speaker notes of this presentation. Which reminds me, we'll share the slide deck with everyone so you can access everything after the talk. So now, a quick disclaimer before diving into the meat of this talk. Neither Anshuman nor I are experts in the field, so nothing we say is set in stone. Take everything we say with a pinch of salt and evaluate for yourself if this adds value for you or not. And then both of us are studying human-computer interaction programs. So our answers, and they're both industry oriented. So our answers are probably biased towards that. So just keep that in mind as we go through the entire talk here. So what are we talking about today? So this is a question each potential candidate tries not to think about when they begin their journey applying for a master's program in general. This question basically is, why are we doing a master's in the first place? Okay, on the face of it, it seems like a very obvious question. Isn't that the first thing you'd answer before anything else? That is, right? Well, you'd be surprised at the number of people we've come across who don't really have a proper answer to this question. Why do you want to do a master's? Almost everyone we know is scrambling to find out everything else surrounding the process of getting into a master's program, right? What are the best programs to apply to? Will I get in? And will I get in if I don't have any published research? Should I scramble to put across like published journals and conferences and stuff? Does my CPI matter? Should I focus on getting good grades? Does my GRE score matter? There are a lot of things that are supposed to be considered in this process. And yes, all of these are valid questions. But unfortunately, scrambling to find answers to these questions is just simply an escape mechanism. It's a mechanism of escape from the simple yet very important question: why do you want to do a master's? Now, the thing is, yes, this question can seem scary and a little too big to answer. Understandably, because yeah, when they've done that, the both of us have also gone through this entire process, and it's not something like, oh, I want to do it because everyone else is doing it. That isn't really the answer to a very important question like this. So for you to answer it properly, you would need to really sit down with yourself, be honest with yourself, and ask yourself, what is it that you really want to do? And is a master's really the right course of action for you? So let's break it down. Here are a series of questions that are less vague and definitely more direct that will help you potentially answer that question for yourself. Question one: what is the one thing about design which excites you the most? Is it a particular domain? Maybe some technology that excites you and you want to design for that? Maybe it's some part of the design process that really gets you going and you want to really do well in that. Or maybe it's something else in terms of a particular field that you want to do. But at the end of the day, you need to find out what is it that really gets you going. The second question would be, why does it excite you? Is it based on a whim? Maybe you saw a few videos and now you feel like you need to try it? Or is it because you've given it a shot and you really think this is the future for you? But at the end of the day, why is it that that particular thing, whatever you decide is the most exciting for you, why does it excite you? Do you have an answer to that? Thirdly, what will the program give you that you can't really achieve by yourself? Is it something that you can't learn by yourself, that you need an academic setting for? And is a master's program really the best place to be for it? And if not a master's program, can you do this by maybe, say, taking a couple of months off and exploring it by yourself? Maybe you can try getting an internship or a job somewhere. Or is a master's program really the place to be for it? And lastly, if the master's program isn't what you expected it to be, which, like, in all honesty, can happen sometimes. If it's not what you expected it to be, what is your fallback? What if you got into the master's program, you started exploring, and then realized this isn't really what you wanted to do? What's your plan B in such a situation? So essentially, what I'm trying to get at is it's important to ask and answer these questions, and it's very important that you be honest about it and you really try to understand yourself as a designer and you try to understand what you're trying to do here. At the end of the day, you're the one with the most to gain from a master's program and also potentially lose from it if it doesn't work out. So try to be honest with your intentions and with yourself, and answer based on how you feel now. Now, as you learn new things about yourself and throughout your time in the field of design, your answers will change, yes, but that's okay. That's part of the process of introspection as you grow. As you learn new things, you'll have new interests and you'll realize, okay, something that you wanted to do before maybe isn't what you want to do now. But that's okay. But you still have to, based on how you feel right now, if you're really asking the question, do you want to do a master's? You have to ask yourself these questions and be prepared for them to change in the future. So give it a shot, see where it leads, and remember that these questions aren't exhaustive. There's definitely more where they came from. These are just 4 questions that we felt were more ideal to a master's in design, and they really gave us the right direction to go into. But the intention here is to get your juices flowing and get you thinking about answers and thinking about a master's program or thinking about a master's in design along these lines. Now, Anshuman will give you a more visual depiction of what those answers can look like, and I'll hand it over to him.
Thanks, Mahit. So, I think one common mistake which people end up doing when they're answering these questions is often they come up with very vague or abstract answers. And this could be because of a lot of reasons. It could be because you're at a point in your career or just life where you don't really understand yourself that well, or maybe you haven't thought about it that clearly, or you haven't received clarity on certain aspects of design or what you want to do with your career. So that's why I think this is very common mistake we see people doing, or this might also just be your brain kind of falling back into your comfort zone, being like, okay, okay, I've answered this question now I'm done. Like they told me to answer these 4 questions and I've answered them and now I'm sorted. So I think your answers, like this is a useful rubric to kind of gauge if your answers are where you want them to be, based on yeah. So the first of all, your answer should be clarifying. Like they should be something which kind of gives you a new way of seeing the same problem or the same goal which you're trying to achieve. And it should be very clear, and it should be non-obvious at the end of the day. It shouldn't be that, okay, this is something which I knew, and if we do A, then B is going to happen. That's the obvious outcome of it. Then another thing which you should kind of strive to do is try to make your answer inspiring in that it inspires a range of solutions and not just one. Instead of being like, okay, this is the only way I can do this, make your answer to a question like, okay, what excites me about design, or why do I want to do this, into something which gives you a bunch of different options of like, okay, I need to get from point A to point B, and there are 3 different ways I could do that, and masters might just be one of them. So the more inspiring your answer is, the more likely it is that you'll consider a range of other possibilities as well. And then if your masters is the best possibility out of that, sure, but you'll have considered all of them before making that decision. And then finally, your answers to these questions should be actionable. They should be something which helps you actually take decisions and steps towards them. Even if those steps are something as simple as, okay, I need to Google the different programs which exist in Europe, or okay, I need to find out if there's a way for me to work with this professor without doing a master's. And there are programs. One of my friends who's in the program right now with me worked with a professor of who she really liked for a whole year before she came to this master's through an internship lab assistant setup. But it's something to think about, So kind of having your answers be actionable, being like, okay, what would my next steps be from this point? Even if it's next steps to get more information in terms of research, or next steps in terms of applying somewhere, or looking something else up, or something like that, or even like more longer term next steps, which is like, okay, once I get here, these are the things I'm going to be doing. But as long as they give you certain steps, no matter how small, towards going from point A to point B, it's good. So, and we know this is much easier said than done. I think all of the 3 things which I just mentioned, making things clarifying, inspiring, and actionable, are a lot harder to do in practice than it is to speak about in theory. So, this is a very interesting. One second, oh, never mind. This is an interesting mental model which might help you all. It's known as the ladder of abstraction, and it's very popularly. It's not something we've come up with. It exists in the world out there. But essentially, what the ladder of abstraction does is it helps you just anytime you come up with any sort of like a question or an answer to that question, you exist somewhere on this infinite ladder, right? And if you want to move up on that ladder, you go from more concrete to more abstract situations, and you ask why. So why is this happening, or why would I do this, or kind of digging deeper into the digging deeper into cutting at the overarching reason behind it, and then asking how gets you to the more concrete parts of that question, and making it more actionable for sure. So this is again, even though we came up with this model to help you gauge that rubric better, I know this too is not the best explained. So I think just going to show you all some examples for this. So for example, say one of the answers you come up with is, I want to explore design. Now that is very abstract, right? Let's dig a little deeper. Let's ask, okay, how? And then you'll probably figure out, okay, then I want to do a couple of different projects in different areas. Sure, that's a much better answer than just I want to explore design. But can we dig a little deeper? Can we keep asking ourselves the how and trying to get to the core of what we're trying to do, and then be more actionable about it? So much more clearer and much more like fleshed out answer would be, I want to get into the field of design, and I want to experiment with 2 to 3 areas to figure out what it is that I enjoy the most, and then I'm going to try and get a job in one of those areas. I think this is very clear. It gives you a lot of different ways in which you want to be able to achieve this thing. It's not just, oh, I want to do this masters just because that's the only way to do it. And it's inspiring. It gives you a bunch of solutions. It's very clear instead of being vague, like I want to explore design, and it's actionable. You just reading this, my mind is already going off on like 2 or 3 different solutions I can use to kind of achieve that. Let's look at another one. I want a job in the US, another common thing used by a lot of graduates. So this is again super abstract, right? So then a little more clearer one would be, okay, I want to get out of my comfort zone and I want to get out of the Indian design bubble and kind of see what the world outside has in store for me. And that is so much more clearer. And then one step further would be, I want to experience the culture outside of India, see if my assumptions are true, and then decide if I want to stay or come back. Like this is something which has gotten to a point after you've done a lot of like introspection slash soul searching, like all this exercise, whatever you feel the best. But at the end of the day, this is going to get you a lot closer to your two motivations and goals than you were at the start of it. One last example is I climbed the corporate ladder faster, and one of the like a more deeper or a more like clearer role for that is, okay, I'm probably gonna, after a master's degree, I'm gonna be more qualified, so I'll probably join the company at a more senior position than I would do after a bachelor's. And then if you dig deeper into that and kind of try to understand how would that actually make me climb the ladder faster, like you'll realize that, okay, I'll end up increasing my domain knowledge, I can work with little to no hand holding, and I can take initiative, and those are the things which people look for in more senior folks, and that is going to accelerate my career growth. So you see how singling out these smaller things is actually going to help you in kind of realizing also what you should be focusing on along the journey there. And this is a quick point about, like, I know some of you all in the audience or some of the people who will be watching this talk later will probably have already made up their mind. They're like, okay, I don't want to be convinced if I need to do a master's. I know that I have to do a master's for whatever reason. There's a lot of different people have different conditions, different, like, it's a privileged stance to just say that, oh, make a choice every single time. When some people might, for some people, might not be a choice, but it might just be a reality. So that's fine. If you've already made up your master's mind about the master's, answer these questions anyway. The reason you should do that is because, firstly, it's going to massively help you in your statement of purpose, which is going to be a big, like, almost pivotal part of your application. I think that it can pretty much make or break your application. And at the end of the day, in the statement of purpose, they're looking for genuine passion and genuine, like, clarity as to why you want to be doing this master's. And I think you putting yourself through this process is going to give you a lot more clarity on that. So you're going to be kind of setting yourself up for success if you end up uh, applying eventually. Another thing which you should be mindful of is what I just mentioned, which is the system in the States is quite different from the one which we're used to in India, right? So here, everything is a lot more flexible in the sense that I could be, for example, there's obviously the flexibility offered in terms of taking electives and really getting to choose how you want to structure your course. But there's also flexibility in terms of other things, like uh, your professors will be willing to change the course, like course correct and change the direction of the curriculum mid semester if you ask them and tell them that, hey, I think these research methods are kind of old and we kind of want to learn more. And this is something obviously which you can't do alone, but you can do with like a consensus from your class, but that is possible, right? So if you know that, for example, one of your reasons to do a master's is that I want to improve my ability to do research and come up with insights, and I want to be able to do it in a much more in a way that is repeatable and it doesn't feel like a stroke, like a strike of lightning, then I want to get better at that process, and then you can kind of talk to your professor and make that happen. Or you can also another place where your masters where this is thinking about these questions is going to help you during your masters a lot is because you'll be working in a lot of group projects, and what ends up happening in group projects is that it's very flexible in terms of, like, you all of you all get to decide who wears what hats for. And if you don't have that level of clarity about yourself and what you want to get out of your master's program, then it can get really hard to kind of, I mean, then a lot of times people take a more passive role and they just like kind of are handed things of like, okay, I guess you'll do the screens, you'll do the research related stuff, and then we can all work on like the project direction. But if you are someone who knows that, okay, I already am pretty comfortable with screens, but I really need to get better at research, and that's like half the reason I came for this master's, then you can make that case there. Like, oh, I think someone else should do the screens and I can do. Anyways, you get the drift. So these are the two reasons why I feel like, and there's a lot more, but like, even if you think that you have, like, even if you have come to the answer of like, okay, I really really do need to do a master's and I have made up my mind, I don't need to kind of get to this point, answering these questions will still help. So just to recap what we've spoken about so far. Um, first ask yourself the right questions. These are, well, one, what excites you about design the most, and then answering why does it excite you the most. Then also talk about what happens when, if you come here and then it turns out that it isn't what you expected to be. What would your fallout be? Taking fallback be, sorry. Going off on the earlier example of, say you wanted to come here and really get strong in your research skills, but you get here and you realize, wait a second, there isn't any research related stuff happening in my program at all. I was mistaken when I had read up about this stuff, and you maybe just missed it over the months of preparing to get over here. What would your fallback be? One possible fallback would be like, find labs and professors on the campus in the university who are doing interesting research and try and join them, because that's a possibility too. So thinking about these things really helps. The last question, this is not the last question, like Mahit said, these are not exhaustive. These are things to get you started. So another question would be, what is the program going to be able to give you that you can't achieve yourself? Then to kind of have a helpful rubric to how you're answering these questions, you should remember three things. Make sure that your answers are clarifying, inspiring, and actionable. Each of the definitions of what those words mean and some examples are there in the slides. And if you want help making them more clarifying or exhaustive, making them more clarifying or inspiring or actionable, you can use the ladder of abstraction to do that. And this is a really hard process. Like, even making your answers, getting there, it's like it takes a level of maturity as well as self introspection or self reflection, which most people don't have when they are applying to their masters, especially because you all are at the undergrad level. So I think this is going to be a hard process. Don't beat yourself up too much if you aren't able to like make all of your answers perfectly there, because sometimes we just don't know until we've experienced something, and that's fine. As long as your answers are at least trying to hit like one or two boxes out of these three, it's okay. Start from there and like kind of keep digging deeper whenever you can. So yeah, so use the ladder of abstraction to get there. And finally, be honest with yourself, because I think, like Mahit mentioned as well, this is something which is going to be one of the most heavy monetary investments, but also just investments of time in your career. And then you shouldn't do it under false pretenses. Don't do it because, I mean, telling other people is one thing. I don't care what you all tell other people, but you should be very clear as to why you're doing a master's. Even if it is something what is perceived as shallow as other people, or something being like, oh, I just want a job in the States. Like, if that's your motivation, be true to it. You don't have to necessarily tell that same thing to other people, but you, in your heart of hearts, should know that that is the main reason you're going there for. Because what that's going to allow you to do is, once you get here, it'll allow you to kind of make your moves and change things according, like making, keep that at the back of your mind and make your moves so that you end up achieving that goal. So yeah, that was the talk. And in conclusion, your degree is just a means to an end. Getting a master's should not be the end goal. Getting a master's should be something which is like, okay, I want to do this, and this is what I need to get a master's in order to achieve it. Even for people who are not interested in industry and want to get into academia, very rarely have I met folks in like their PhDs as well as their master's programs who will say that, oh, I just knew that I wanted to become a researcher and that's why I had to do a master's. No, it always comes from a place of like, I was absolutely passionate about this one field and I knew that I wanted to research more into this one field, even if it is super vague, like, you know, robotics, or if it's something more specific, like, oh, I want to help make I'm not going to get into the details, but the point is that people come in with a clarity of what they want out of this. People who are doing research don't come in with the clarity of, I want to become a grad student. They come in with the clarity of, I want to publish research on this. I want to help the research community and add to the scientific knowledge which already exists out there. So yeah, so a degree doesn't resolve the lack of clarity in your life. It's a means to achieve what comes with your initial clarity. Um, and yeah, thank you for listening. Do you all have any questions? I'm going to open up the floor to that. Just feel free to unmute the mic and speak up if you do.
Okay. Hi, guys. Hi, Anshuman and Mahit. Firstly, thank you. The maturity and like the clarity with which you guys were able to articulate, and also in like, it's a relatively abstract topic, and you were able to almost give us like a cookbook level instruction, which is kind of like inspiring. So, I mean, it was definitely inspiring enough that I have the idea to take some action. So that's fantastic. You guys briefly touched upon like the different electives and all that you can take. Of just speaking for myself, I'm kind of torn between two broad categories that I want to experiment. And I know US is a place where you can actually make that happen. So like if I want to maybe do visual communication along with design strategy and management, will I be able to find particular courses for that? And like especially with like concerns of, I don't know, maybe recession and stuff coming up, will, as Indians, do we have to like think about that to some capacity? But thanks again. I know this was also relatively open-ended, but please share this PPT. I'd like to answer some of these questions for myself, and thanks again for everything. Yeah.
Mahit, do you wanna take a jab at it first?
Sure. First off, thank you so much. That was very kind. I think you have two questions in there. Will you be able to explore two different sort of diametrically opposing fields, and will you have to consider the recession? Short answers for both, yes, but let me elaborate a little bit on that. So the first question, I think one of the benefits, at least from our experience in the US, is you do have the opportunity to explore and take up electives on a broad range of subjects. Uh, if you choose to do, say, an MDes, you most likely will have visual design oriented electives within the department, which most people will already take up, and you just have the opportunity to take those at any of your semesters. Say design management, if you don't find it within the department, if it's a university which has say a business school, you most definitely will also have the opportunity to reach out to the professor there and say, this is something I'm really interested in. Would you be fine if I pick up this elective? So essentially, to answer your question, yes. More often than not, universities do have an open elective policy. So what that means is you can literally just go through their entire schedule of classes. Most they'll have what 200, 300, 400 different electives. Look at anything that catches your fancy. And if it's not an open elective, reach out to the professor. If it is an open elective, all you have to do is register for it. So, but one underlying theme here is that you have to do it for yourself. No one's going to like sort of hand you these electives on a silver platter and be like, these are the electives you can pick and choose. This is mostly self initiated in terms of, okay, this is what I want to do. And if you already have an idea of, okay, these are the things I want to do, that's a great first step. For you to ensure that this is going to be an option for you is for you to look up the universities that you're already considering, see if they have departments along those lines, see if they have more often than not, the electives and the courses that are available are on the internet. They're available for everyone. So all you have to do is look it up, see if you have certain electives that catch your fancy, and be like, okay, yes, this is something I can take up. I will now apply to the university because once I'm there, across my 4 semesters or 3 semesters, I'll take XYZ electives. And the second question, as international students, should we consider the recession? Unfortunately, yes. I wouldn't say it's like your P0 priority. Everything has to be dependent on that sort of a situation. Even if there is a recession, it doesn't mean all jobs are like there are no jobs available. You definitely will find a job. It'll take a little bit more time. It'll take a little bit more effort, and that is something you have to keep in the back of your head. If you know that there's a recession coming in and it might affect you when your actual time to apply comes along, maybe start a couple of months earlier because you know that what would take a month will probably now take 4 months for you to land a job. So these are considerations that you definitely need to have, but I don't think it massively impacts your decision of doing a master's in the first place because even though there's a recession, the program will still run, the economy will still chug along, and there will still be jobs in the market. I hope that answers your question. And if there's anything else, any follow up on that?
Definitely, like that's absolutely fair. I wish I could turn on my video because I was nodding all the way. But but yeah, that's super cool. I'm sure like someone else had some questions. If I do have something else, I will come up because I already have 2 other questions.
Awesome, cool.
Yeah, I see. I mean, I think Digisha is keeping track of the questions. I saw 2 hands up. I saw Simran and then Chinmay as well. But yeah, just
Hey, hey Mahit. Anshuman, I met you at India HCI 2019. I
Oh,
have
okay.
a bachelor's in human-centered design from Sree. So
Mhm.
basically, right now, first of all, great presentation. You really broke it down the way the person before was breaking it down, and I'm so glad you've set the framework for us to think about it. So while it comes to thinking about a master, I see that both of you have chosen the field of human computer interaction to pursue your masters in.
Mhm.
So since I come from this conflict area where okay, I have a degree in human centered design, I've
Mhm.
explored the domain of design, I get to sort of
Mhm.
pursue a career in the field.
Mhm.
But I do know from the conferences and everything that we were able to tap into at the time that I was inclined towards research, and
Mhm.
I still want to figure out what theme I want to sort of get into. But because I was also exposed to the area of human computer interaction, I want to ask you if from a bachelor's in design to a master's in HCI, what kind of value does the HCI part add to
Mhm.
your design, if that makes any sense? Because from a research standpoint in particular, because as far as I understand, HCI is a broad field, right? You have
Mhm.
many academic topics within to sort of explore.
Yep.
So what is the kind of value do you think your master's has added into your
Mhm.
choices, and how do you think that helps you navigate?
Yeah. I think Mahit will be better situated to answer that question since he did a bachelor's in design as well. I can follow up with some research related stuff because I was also super into research when I was in bachelor's. But then Mahit, you go
I,
first.
sure, I'll get started. First off, that's a great question because this is a question I'm asked very often. I've already done a bachelor's in design. Was there any benefit to doing a master's in design or HCI in the first place? Um, on the face of it, some of the topics that I've learned and some of the concepts that were taught to me, there is quite some overlap for sure. Um, the whole design process, you do research, then you define your requirement definition, and then you ideate. That entire design process framework is the same. And because in the HCI program, there are people who come in from a design background like me, and there are people who come in with zero design background, jump like pivoting fields and coming up from completely different fields. The program had to sort of start from like to sort of teach design from scratch. Now, the most value that I saw from the program was sort of learning all of these concepts from the from the mindset of UX design and HCI. So in my bachelor's, at least in IIT Guwahati, across the 4 years, what we learned was a very fundamental design thinking framework. It was end result agnostic. So what I mean by that is you learn how to like if you're given a problem statement, you sort of learn how to break it down. You try to understand the domain, then you identify exactly what will solve that problem, and then you decide, okay, what is my final solutions form going to be? Is it going to be something physical? Is it going to be a card game? Is it going to be, say, an awareness campaign? Is it going to be a mobile app? We never knew that. So across the 4 years, I got an opportunity to dabble in each of them, right? I did some visual design stuff, I did some industrial design stuff, I worked in the workshop for like 3 semesters. um, i I did like all kinds of fields of design. The benefit of HCI for me was I could sort of tailor make my process specifically with the end result of it being an HCI oriented product. So that way my research questions, the kind of research protocols that I chose and the research methods I chose to employ in different projects were more specific to, okay, this is the solution or this is the product that's going to be. I need responses based on that. I learned testing protocols, especially based on what my end result is going to be. I learned how to brainstorm, ideate, and conduct certain synthesis methods based on the end result. So, is there an overlap? Yes, for sure. But the benefit is that now you're looking at it from a completely different lens because you're sort of narrowing down, like quote unquote specialize. I know it has a different connotation, but you're sort of narrowing down your scope to one specific field. Um, Now, was that like massive and completely mind blowing? No, for sure. But definitely, when I sort of took a step back and tried to realize what did I learn, what did I really learn here, I think that was something that made me at least a better UX designer than what I had done before. Because before I never really knew those like methods and all of that specific to the field. Uh, and that is at least the BDS perspective. Anshuman, you can add more on the research side.
Yeah, I think one of the things which, along with everything Mahit said, adding on to that would be you also find out a lot of things in extraordinary depth. So I think we don't necessarily go into that level of detail and depth in anything. We kind of just like gloss over and cover a lot of things. At least when I say we, I mean like I was self-taught when I was in bachelor's, right? So I just like read shit online, and I there was a lot of information online, but I still never, even after like publishing, like we published papers and stuff, like we knew research methods, we knew all the things which are out there, and we knew if we need to do anything, this is how we'll do it. But for like in masters, you have the ability to dig deep to the level of like, if we take something like something like the very commonly used adage of like n equals to 5 is a good n equals to 7 is like a good number to like kind of cap your total number of research participants at, right? Like then you find out more about, then you realize, oh, that's only specific to usability tests, and there's been this studies done to show that after a certain number of participants the statistical significance kind of drops. I think if anything, it kind of gives you a lot more confidence on what you're talking about and what you know. And I think that is something which people also outside, because they look to you, people in the industry at the end of the day, they just want to like, if you're doing research or in the industry, they want to get to a certain hypothesis or they want to find something out. And that's what the whole point of that is. So I think knowing that they can depend on you to just make sure that you're doing this as rigorously as possible, because in academic research, scientific rigor is of huge importance. I think that's what one of the differences with the masters is. And also another thing is that I feel like the quality of research which happens at the university level here, I don't know if this is necessarily because it's like I don't know how true this is. I know there are some really amazing professors and researchers back in India too. I have been blown away by some of the like star like tenured professors who I've worked with here, and I've just been like in awe of the quality at which it happens. This could be a reason. This could be because of a lot of different reasons. One of the big reasons is that a lot of these universities get a lot more funding than research in India does. And that's, I mean, I don't know, I am not fit to answer onto why that is, but like I feel like that leads to a lot more of a rigorous and like more specific research. Another thing, I'm going to cap this answer here, not go on for too long, but one thing which you mentioned about HCI being a large umbrella, right? Like once you get here, you'll realize people are doing research in the most niche of spaces across the entire umbrella. In India, most of our research, as it should be, I feel like is centered around a certain broad range of topics which are very pertinent to India and the kind of things that the current episteme is going through, and like what we are kind of coming up with as we venture into this next decade in India. But I think here it's very like specialized, and each of them have their own pros and cons. There are researchers here who are doing research about things back home. There are Indian researchers who have come here, set up their labs, professors, and they are researching specifically on like things back home. But one good thing here is then they get the funding from here, and then they're like able to use that to collaborate with people at Microsoft Research or stuff like that. So there's a lot of that happening where I think the large umbrella which exists under HCI, you really see it. I think until now we just talk about it. Like we've had I have seen so many research. I've been exposed to so much research which I never knew that even existed. I didn't even know things like post-userism was a thing, and I was like, sure, that person has spent their entire life working on that, and that's that. But it really exposes you to a lot of other research topics. For yeah, so that's I think a good another piece of caveat which I'd give for research related to masters.
Thank you so much. That really helps, and I will be bugging you guys in the future. But for now, this really helps. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Yeah, I'm Chinmay. And
Hi,
firstly, it
Chinmay.
was a really great presentation. Loved all of it.
Yeah.
And my question goes to Anshuman.
Mhm.
As I'm also from chemical engineering, and currently I'm doing, I'm in my third year right now. And I would love to know about what made you think that design is the right transition from your designated branch. And also, at what point of your degree did you make this decision? Can you just elaborate upon that?
Yeah, I think two things. One, I think the point at which I found that the reason why they're kind of linked. So in my second year, I came into chemical engineering and I was like, okay, I really like, I want to kind of do something for climate change and stuff. So I started working on solar cells, and that's when I realized trying a little bit of working in the lab in chemical engineering made me realize that the kind of gratification I'll get from that work isn't for me. It'll take like 7 to 15 years for that work to actually get to the market, and I was like, I don't know if I want to wait around that long. And then I obviously tried the other usual suspects. People who don't like their core branch go to coding, go to finance, and then try something else. I was lucky in the fact that I was in IIT Guwahati, where there happened to be a design department. I don't know if it was because of that or because of my friends there, but I chanced upon this article on Gestalt psychology, and I think that is one like very clear point which I remember, which was like I remember being blown away by the concept of psychology generally, and till date I am very passionate about that. I think one of the moments when I realized that design is what I want to be doing, and this is it's okay to make that transition, is I spent like I think I was working on like some logo concept, something just like off the internet, and I spent like a good 6 or 7 hours on it through the day, and I did not realize where that time went. I suddenly looked out and I was like, wait a second, it's 10 o'clock already. I just sat down, it was 3. And I think that kind of made me realize that, especially in contrast to my chemical engineering degree, because I was like, okay, this is something which I'm having so much fun doing. Like I would be excited to get out of the bed and go do this if this was my job. And I think that is something which kind of really drove home the point that this is something I want to do. I think just finding something which excites you and gives you that much passion and happiness is something which I was lucky enough to get. A lot of people might not find that, and that's fine. Design is just this job and a way to like just like another way to like kind of make money for some people, and that's completely fine too. I think making for people who might not be super passionate about design but want to get into it, I'd still say like figure out if this is something which you find yourself uh, enjoying some part of. Like it doesn't have to be like, oh, I love this is my life, I'm going to make this my whole personality, but it should be something which you don't feel bad doing, because you'll be doing it a lot. If it's a job, you're going to do it for the rest of your life for a foreseeable future. So I'd say think about that. I think now things are so much better than when I made the transition. I think there's almost I know people almost from every field now who have made a transition into design. Back when I was there, I was like, I think the only person in my college who was thinking about this that early on. I had 2 seniors who had made a transition like a little later. But yeah, to answer the second question, it's I did that decision in sophomore year. Second year. I've gotten used to saying sophomore after I've come here. But second year, I made that decision, and I just committed to it pretty early on. And that's also something which I was like privileged enough to be able to do. I was able to just like fight my parents and be like, no, this is what I want to do. I'm sorry. And I didn't tell them for a really long time until I got an internship that this is what I'm doing. So there was that aspect of things which I think I was lucky in, which other people might not have. But that's fine. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, this is so much.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, hi Anshuman, hi Mahit. So actually, I just realized, I know that you're both in University of Washington and CMU, right? So both of your courses are 1-year courses, right? And I wanted to know what made you decide to select on a 1-year course compared to the 2-year course. So currently, I'm torn between this decision, and I would like to know what factors you considered while making this decision.
Do you want to take that?
Okay. So yeah, that's a great question. I think that's definitely one of the things to keep in mind. Like me and Mahit said at the start of this thing, I think be aware that we are both in HCI and industry-oriented courses. This is what we meant, because not only are our courses 1 year, they're also very specific to teaching you things which you will be ending up using in the industry. So very few of the people in our batch who are our batchmates end up going into research. Most of the people come into this program knowing that they want to get into the industry, and I think that is the answer to the question. It's a pretty short one, which is that we knew that we wanted to kind of work and we wanted to get some work experience after we get here, and we didn't want to spend 2 years doing the masters, and we were like, just get it over in 1 year. It'll be quick, it'll be fast, and we'll learn. Yeah, so I think that was one of the big reasons why we chose 1 year program. For being torn between 1 and 2 year programs, I would kind of think about two things. One is that what would be the benefit which you will be getting if you do a 2 year program, and what would be the benefit if you're doing a 1 year program. The 1 year program's difference would be that you'll be able to start earning sooner and then being able to pay back like any loans or anything else that you might have to take for coming here. And the 2 year programs situation might be, even though it will take you longer to get a job or graduate, you might be able to get an internship midway, and then that might be able to be converted into full time. So I think just listing those things out and then kind of coming up with like what your motivation is for your masters, like based on the framework which we were talking about. Like I think these answers to all these questions also like are both like very subjective to who me and Mahit are, and it should depend. Only because we have done 1 year programs doesn't mean that they're like better or worse than any other things out there. Some people might even go for integrated masters with something else completely, and that's fine. Find what works for you and try doing that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
No
That
worries.
helps.
Hi guys. So I think it's almost time.
Yeah.
It's nice to look here. So do you guys want to take more questions in, or should we like end it here?
I think we can take one more question.
Yeah, I
I
think
see
so.
someone has their hand up.
Hi, Anshuman and Mahit.
Hi.
Thank you for such a great session. I wanted to ask one question. What really caught me in the session was you mentioned that your courses are industry focused, and also that you wanted to explore how design is in the US outside of India. So suppose if someone, for example me, I'm not able to attend masters in the US or abroad anywhere, how can I still get these opportunities? Like, how can I still find industry focused opportunities? And yeah, do you have any advice for that? Like, so even if I'm still in India, what can I do to work towards that and potentially find a job abroad without the master's degree? If you have any insight, thanks in advance.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. That's a great question. Mahit, you want to take that? Should I?
Sure, I can take a stab at that, and you can add on to this.
Yeah.
So there are, so if I answer correctly, there are like two different things here. One is if you want to get a job abroad, right? If that's your goal, and you're sort of trying to understand how I can do that. Yes, a master's program, although expensive, is a sure shot way of doing that. There are other routes for you to consider. One would be to sort of get a job in a MNC, a global company, which has offices across the globe. And more often than not, these companies have opportunities for you to apply internally, for you to switch from one internal team to the other across the globe. So, for example, if you join Microsoft, for example, if you join Microsoft and you start working in Hyderabad, what you can do is you can apply to a role that is, say, based out of Redmond in the US. And if you get selected for that role, basically they'll facilitate your move internally. So that's one definite possibility to consider. Another way to do it is directly apply for roles outside. There are a lot of people we know who started working in India, applied directly to roles in Europe and in the US, and got it. We have like if you're already working here, you have the required skill sets, you have the required expertise to apply and get the job. There are a lot of factors like visas and stuff which will come into play, but that's secondary. But if it's simply about, okay, I want to get a job, move out of the Indian design bubble and get a job outside, masters is not the only route. It is a sure shot way of doing it, but it's definitely not the only way to do it. I think your second question was, how do you get industry oriented how do you get industry oriented courses and stuff, right, within India, if you want to do it outside? Was that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My question is, so let's say I cannot study abroad, specifically do a master's degree. How can I learn those things in other ways? That was what I wanted to know.
Got it.
All right, I already answered the first one. Anshuman, you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. I think just following up on what Anshuman I said, I think I know like one of our friends just recently has done the same thing of like working at some company which also has like headquarters in the States, and he wanted to move eventually to the States, and he did that. Like in 2 years of working, he proved that he's really valuable. He proved his skill set, and now the company is paying for him to fly over here. They've increased his salary, and now he's going to be working out of states. So I think that is definitely a more I would say viable solution, applying directly. While it's also, I mean, I know people who have done it. It is also very very hard because of the whole visa situation. Like I would not take that lightly at all. I mean, couple of the seniors, I think even Chavi, she was in the last Tashkil, like she did that, but with London, and she made that move happen. It took her a longer like way, but that was something which she ended up doing. And I think that is another thing to keep in mind is that time aspect of things. I think a lot of us kind of think of oh, we need to do this by this age, or we have to do this by this age, and we're really like pushing ourselves and rushing things, and we don't necessarily always need to do that. Sometimes you can take your way around things. Even with masters, a lot of time, like some people in my program are 30 plus or like 30 like years of age, and they were doing such different things before this. They were like environmental scientists or something like that, but doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, whatever journey you end up taking is only going to help you when you actually end up there. So even if you end up, for example, working 2 years in some company in India or say Barcelona before you get to the States, you're going to be, that experience is going to help you. So I just wanted to add on to that with what Matt said. With regard to getting experience, so I think one of the things why an industry focused program helps is because, one, you get to use processes and tasks which are already used currently in the industry. Like, you get to learn those things directly. So instead of teaching us every single thing which exists in the research handbook, we are taught things which are most commonly used in the industry. Instead of teaching us every single thing, way of ideating, or like methods like sprints, all of these things which we focus on are mostly the ones which people end up using in the industry. How you could do that is, one, well, work. Like, this is essentially, the masters is like an equivalent of like getting industry experience. Like, so I would say, even if it is not US specific, like working generally is great. Obviously, regarding the culture and other things, to get those, I would suggest reaching out to people. So networking with professionals who work here. So either it could be Indians who've come here and started working. They'll be able to give you a good perspective of the switch between who have worked for like at least 1 to 2 years in the States. They'll be able to give you a good difference between what it was like working in India versus what it's like working here. And just talking to people slash reaching out to them like on message slash email about what their day-to-day day in a life of a designer looks like. There are also other things which you can kind of get more experience of working together with, which our programs provide us, which is working in a team. I think the team dynamics thing is a heavily underplayed role, which we don't realize. We think design never works in a silo. You will always be collaborating with either other designers or PMs, engineers, etc. So I think keeping that in mind, try to do more group projects and try to seek out collaborators who you are inspired by or who you think are really cool. There's a lot of indie projects happening, side projects happening within the Indian design space as well, and there are a lot of things happening globally. Like, there's hackathons and stuff where you can find like-minded people, and because of how easy, like, everything happening asynchronously has made stuff, you can very well work with someone from a different time zone. It'll be harder. You'll have to do your research. We haven't done that, so I wouldn't know. But I definitely have friends here who have done it in the past. I have friends who have people who know each other from the program before they even came here, because they met at some random hackathon online, which is completely virtual, before they came here. So I would look into that. So look into getting better at working in teams, understanding and going through those team dynamics. Look at learning from people who are in the industry currently, because even we do that. Some of our lecturers who come in and teach us, they tell us about like their working professionals who also take lectures on the side. So yeah, I'll keep the answer there. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you so much.
No
I'll
worries.
keep all of this in mind. Thanks again.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, Mahit, I think I saw Soumya's hand up, but I don't know if we're at time or if you want to go. What do you think?
I'm okay. I can spend a couple more minutes.
Couple more minutes. Okay. I can also do like, unless the question's answered, I saw Soumya's hand go up and then go down again, so I'm not sure. Or if anyone else has any last burning questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi again. So I had a question about portfolio, right? So Anshuman, you are from chemical background, and Mahit, you are from design. So I know that Mahit would be definitely having some portfolio to present. But Anshuman, how did you work around your portfolio, and what all projects could I be presenting?
Okay. I'll keep this answer short, because I think portfolio is one of the most commonly kind of caught on projects. I'll talk about my experience, so that's like something which you can't find online. But I'd say there's so much stuff about portfolios already. I can also, in the show notes, I think I'll add towards the end a question. I think I did this random podcast slash talk with a friend of mine about design portfolio. So I think I can link that there to give you a better idea. But for me personally, what I did was, I used to spend my time outside of chemical engineering working on projects, and most of my projects would be self-taught until I learned skills to a certain degree, and then I seeked out projects around me. So I think because like I said, I was lucky to be at IIT Guwahati where there was a department of design. So I took that up. But I would look to places like IIT Roorkee and other places where there are no design departments, but students there still take up projects and just work on things by themselves. I think there's a lot of honestly, just at the end of the day, your portfolio needs to show how you think, and if you can do that, that's enough. But yeah, I can like there's a talking about portfolios is like a whole talk on in itself. But for me personally, I ended up doing side projects and showed that I can think as a designer to people to get my first break, because that's the hardest thing to do, getting your first break, because everyone's like, we want to see experience, but you won't get experience unless you have something on your portfolio. So I get that it's a hard place to be in, but I personally did side projects and worked on my own personal like self-driven projects to make my first break happen, and then that kind of like helped me get the second thing, and then so on. So yeah, I will link in the slides, Gitika, I will add that link to that talk, so hopefully that will be helpful.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah. Okay. I think nobody else is. Okay. Akanksha is.
One last question today.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you for the presentation and the amazing insights which you've given. It's really helpful for a student and for a person who's just completed the bachelor's. So that's when my questions comes in that, like, how do you decide like what's the right time for you to go for the master's, like which you mentioned in your questions as well. But it's really difficult. You're just coming out of your bachelor's, and people say that if you get into a job structure, it's really hard to get back to the studies. So so that's a dilemma you have, that like whether masters, because obviously there's a being a design student in the bachelor, you have that curiosity to learn more and explore other fields as well, because design opens you to various other fields and domains, right? And that's when it lies that, is it better to get an experience in an industry and then decide and go for a master's, or is it better to complete your studies and then start working? Or so I think it's a more open-ended, but yeah.
I can take a stab at that to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay, so some programs, like if you find a program that you really want to do, sometimes they'll force you to have work experience. So that's an answer that someone else is giving you, and you just like, fine, if you need me to have 2 years of work ex, I'll have 2 years of work ex before I apply, and that'll solve all your problems for you. But that aside, I think the decision of waiting for a couple of years to do a master's and then doing it immediately has no direct impact on the master's and your job search after that. It's mostly a personal choice. Yes, a lot of people say that if you've been in the industry for a while, getting back into an academic setting might be difficult. But that I would, like in my personal experience, I would say that only applies to if you've been in the industry for like 4 or 5 years, you've reached a senior level, you like really gotten used to the industry, and then you're going back to academia. If it's just like 1, 2, maybe 3 years, it probably shouldn't be that big of a deal. And essentially, if your decision of whether you want to wait or not is, like I said, purely dependent on what is it that you want to do. Do you want to experience let me try a different approach to this. If you're on the fence about if you want to do a master's, if you're like, okay, this is something I really want to consider doing, but I'm not sure, I'm not 100% sure, then one way to go about it is, okay, work for a couple of years, see if you like it. If you like the job that you're doing, and if you like the field that you're in, your instinct, like automatically you'll be like, I don't even need to do a master's anymore. I see a lot of potential for me to grow here. And that answers your question. But if you're very sure that yes, definitely a master's is on the cards for me, this is a no-brainer, then there's no point waiting. Waiting for a couple of years to get some industry and then going to master's is not going to add a lot of value for you. If you're very clear on it, might as well go immediately. But at the end of the day, I still would say it's a personal decision based on which field you're into, why you're doing the master's in the first place, and where you want to end up after that will give you enough of an answer for you to decide, should I start working now or should I apply immediately? Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think you basically touched upon all the points. I think it's a very, very personal thing, and also in that both of the things which Mahit mentioned are ends of a spectrum. and there can be anything between that, right? So I think one of the things to keep in mind is that I would say this, right? If your decision for going for a master's right after your undergrad is only the fact that, oh, if I get into a job, then I won't be able to do it later on, then I would say maybe think a little deeper. And I know it's really hard to. I think it's the reason we kind of made this super like someone said cookbooky is that because we know that we've been in those shoes. We know it's really hard to kind of grapple with these questions this early on in life, because we're essentially asking you to kind of get a lot of clarity which people don't even achieve till like maybe they're 25 or 30 sometimes, right? So this is hard to do. There's no doubt about it. But our whole point is that if you kind of force yourself to like kind of get out of a comfort zone and try and achieve this clarity, ask yourself again and again, why am I doing this? Why is this important? All of those questions which we kind of went through, I think it will help you get a much more clearer idea of what your motivations are behind it, and be very honest in those motivations. So I think keeping that in mind, I definitely would not recommend. Again, each person their own, and I think it's very hard to generalize this, and I don't have enough context about you or your life to be able to give you a very accurate answer. And even if I did, I don't think any answer I could give would be suffice. Like, you are the best person to judge whether or not a master's is right after undergrad or waiting for a couple of years. I would say that if the only reason you're doing it after undergrad is that I won't be able to do it later on, then I would say maybe think about it a little more, because that wouldn't be that's not necessarily true, because masters isn't going to go anywhere else. It's always going to be there as an option. And this whole idea of like doing it by a certain age also isn't really that helpful, because like Mahit said, if you work for a couple of years, you never know. Like, you work for 2 years and then apply for a master's, it might help you sometime down the line, where you'll be like, okay, now I know that I thought I really liked research, but then I actually did it in the industry and I realized this is not what I want to do. I want to focus a lot more on interaction design or something else. Like, it could be the other way around too. So I think those things will give you more clarity if you don't have enough already. I think if and this is just generally to all the few people who are still left in the call, if a lot of the questions you feel like you're not getting anywhere with, then I would say and if you have things lined up already, like, I think give it some more time. Giving it time would be the best way to go about it. Whereas, like, okay, I don't have enough clarity on this right now, then try something. Like, even if you want to explore other fields, having a job isn't the only way to do that. You can do side projects, do other things on the side with your friends, depending on how much you're able to take on as well. That's a big part of things, because you need a job, you need money at the end of the day, right? So you need something to put food on the table. But on the side of that, if you have time and energy which you want to invest in other things, you could work on random, you could work on making graphic designs, you could learn new skills. It all depends on how driven and how it's all very specific to you. And that's why that comes back to the crux of the answer, that it depends. I hate to say it, but it depends on you as a person. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I really got a gist of everything, and I think it makes more clear, and because it's more specialized, what I feel in masters, and you need to be really clear about what you really like and what you want to get out of this. So I think it makes all the sense together, and thank you for all the valuable insight. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's about it. We'll cap it there. All right.
Thank you so much, Anshuman. Thank you so much, Mahit. That was a really insightful talk. I feel like you guys answered a lot of questions that I did not know that I would need the answers to, I feel. Because even I relate a lot with Anshuman, because even I'm from the technology background and I'm exploring design right now. So thank you so much for this really insightful talk. I guess you'll be sharing the presentation to us soon. We'll be also sharing the presentation with the rest of the attendees today. Whoever came today, thank you so much for your attention. So yeah, thank you, thank you for coming. Thank you for making time for Tashkil'22.
Yeah, absolutely.
All
right, bye-bye.
Bye everyone.
So we've come to the end of day 1. We had 2 amazing talks today. Thank you so much for all the participants who came today. You guys have been an amazing audience. Thank you for you guys have been really nice, really interactive. Thank you for everybody who attended, and good night to all.